we're going to take some Q&A in just a little bit, but one more question until we get to that is the future of digital media and everything that's going on. I mean, where do you see this all going? I mean, we're at an exciting time right now, right? There's a lot going on, audio.
Exciting and scary. But
sure,
yeah.
Sure. So lay it out for us.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's probably a few 3 or 4 mega trends that we're paying attention to. Obviously, the unbundling of television and sort of fragmentation of the video ecosystem is a huge one. And so, I personally feel like we're probably at sort of peak OTT in terms of the number of discrete offerings that people need to subscribe to. I don't think anybody wants to subscribe to a single streaming service to watch one show and then have to remember which service it was on when they want to watch it. So I think we're going to start to see rebundling. But at the same time, there's never been a time where content creators have more access to data, right? So you used to have a bunch of TV executives sitting in a room, writer's room, producers, script, people making decisions in a vacuum. And now you have this amazing access to audience data. What did people watch? Why did they watch it? How long did they watch it for? And I think that has repercussions up and down the sort of value chain of content creation and distribution. As I mentioned before, we're spending a lot of time in audio as well. It's kind of one of the fewer spaces in digital media that isn't controlled by platforms in the same way that digital and video advertising is. And so podcasting has been a small but very quickly growing space. We feel like there's a lot of exciting new players there. We're I'd say, thinking a lot about kind of how the future of content monetization will work. A lot of things have started to move away from advertising towards subscription. And so, at the same time, there's a lot of really interesting new digital services that are sort of content-like health and fitness and wellness that are quite interesting. But yeah, I mean, I could pontificate on the future of media for a long time.
You were talking about the data, right? I mean,
yeah.
This is our 50th live show, which is pretty cool. It's our
100th
podcast, which is really cool, so check it out for sure. But the data is actually the hardest part. I mean, I don't know what to use or where to find. I mean, we get little numbers here and there from LinkedIn or Apple, iTunes. Is there some way we can find out the data better?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because and I mean, thinking about a lot of creative industries, you have that stereotype that people are good at storytelling aren't necessarily good at numbers, right? Not that that's always true, but that's sort of the stereotype, left brain and right brains. And when we've looked at media businesses trying to become more data-driven, generally the problem actually starts at the beginning. They just don't have the metadata, right? Mm-hmm. So, imagine, and at scale, right, you've got television or movie production. We have a portfolio company called StoryFit that applies AI to scripts to basically make better data-driven decisions about creative. And one of the biggest challenges is just first that onboarding period of getting all of the different scripts in the same format. And then a lot of the magic that they do is actually normalizing it so that then they can figure out how many characters they have, how long, and how many lines were in each piece of dialogue before applying any of the AI, NLP magic or any of the analytics around what was the rating of the movie, how many viewers, or what did it pull into the box office, and things like that.
Interesting. Okay. That's a good answer. Anybody, we got questions from the crowd right now. We're going to open it up.
But only 3 to 4, you said, right?
It's up to you. You get to choose. Sandy's got the mic, so she's going to pass the mic.
But you mentioned, sorry. You mentioned, I guess, the sort of numerous online streaming services that are popping up. And it reminds me of what happened to the telephone companies, right? And there was a big separation of all the telephone companies, and then they eventually rejoined. Do you see that happening with the online streaming services as well? And I guess when do you see that sort of reformation happening?
I mean, we're definitely seeing consolidation in the space today. So a lot of that is just driven by the economic realities that you've got. A $20 billion a year media company, which frankly is the size of Bertelsmann, used to be considered a behemoth in media, right? And you're competing with an Apple or a Netflix that's 1 or 2 orders of magnitude larger. Right. So we're seeing that consolidation happen. I actually was thinking of it more from the consumer perspective, where I think more and more we're going to start to see bundles or new forms of a cable bundle that will package those streams together, so that you have an easier discovery experience, right, an easier consumption experience.
Yeah, I can just see the same thing. I was just curious on your perspective of that. Thank you.
Well,
So when somebody comes to you with a deck, how many people actually talk about that deck?
you
Like
mean how many
like
people
you
walk through
screen.
the deck?
Like when you go through the screening, does one person decide, oh, this is gonna go to the next level of looking at it, it's good enough to have a second meeting, or does one person look, or three people sit together, or your whole advisory board?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know how other funds do it. We're a small team, so 5 investment professionals, Brendan, my colleagues here as well. So like, generally speaking, whoever kind of gets the deck first will take a first pass at it. Sometimes it's one of those things where you might not be sure, and you might say, hey, I'd love a second opinion. That's probably the very small minority of the times. Usually if something's interesting enough and passes your first filter, one of us would take a first meeting and then kind of come to the team in our weekly meeting and say, hey, here's a company I met. I'm kind of excited, and kind of hear other people's opinions.
Thank you.
Quick question. You mentioned an initial investment, $100,000 to $250,000.
For a seed company, yeah.
What do you expect as far as typically as a percentage that you want to get from the company?
Oh, I mean,
Equity percentage.
yeah, seed rounds these days are like $5 to $15 million pre-money valuations usually. So I don't know. Cadets do the math. It's usually about 1%. So maybe 0.75%, 1.5%, 2%.
What is a company that size be $250,000?
Oh, we're investing as part of we're investing as part of a syndicate, right? So when we invest we always invest as part of a syndicate. But our seed program is typically a $1 to $250,000 check as part of like a $1 to $2 million seed round. So the company might be raising a couple million, and we'll be a relatively small part of that. Most of our capital gets deployed Series A, Series B, and we might be like half the round with $3 or $4 million check.
I actually have a slightly follow-up. I have a follow-up question on the slightly different angle. What do you expect to see as an outcome of the seed round? So is that a finished product?
Do you mean business milestones, or you mean from a funding perspective?
No, not from the funding perspective. From the funding perspective, I think you answered that question.
Yeah.
But I think from the business milestones, is this the finished product which is getting some traction, or is it just the product, or is it a product with how many users, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, you're raising an interesting question, which is like when I started in seed investing, seed was like paper napkins, and you kind of build a product on that. And at this stage, frankly, like what used to be called seed, a lot of people call pre-seed, and what used to be called Series A is now called seed. And so most of the time when we're investing in a seed, and this depends on the industry, but we're usually investing in a company that already has a product in market, or is very close to bringing a product to market. And so, we're reverse engineering from the Series A, but they're going to have to be generating revenue and having customers, generally speaking, to raise an A. There's certainly social networking companies where it's all about user adoption. We don't do biotech, but I know there's a lot of biotech companies where it's all just about the process of the product discovery. For a lot of stuff we're investing in, to get to the Series A milestone, you might have to have $100,000 to $200,000 in monthly recurring software revenue to kind of raise a typical Series A.